Welcome, and today we're going to talk about cognitive development. And we couldn't talk about this without mentioning our friend Jean Piaget. Piaget introduces the cognitive development theory, in which his theory looks at the course of children's development and the stages in which children pass through to logically understand and make sense of the world. Piaget presents 4 stages of cognitive development, in which are based off of characteristic developmental changes that occur in children. The first stage is the sensory motor stage, from the ages of 0 to 2, where infants think by acting on the world around them, with their eyes, ears, hands, and mouth. Children, when faced with a problem around them, become invested in solving it. The second stage is the preoperational stage, from the ages of 2 to 7 years old, where children begin to use symbols to represent their early discoveries in the world around them. In this stage, children also begin to develop language and make-believe play, however still lack knowledge of the world around them in which they need to discover. The third stage is the concrete operational stage, from the ages of 7 to 11 years old, where children become more logical and better organized in their reasoning. These children really only think in a logical, organized fashion when dealing with concrete information in which they directly perceive. The fourth stage is the formal operational stage, from ages 11 plus, where there is a gained capacity for abstract, systematic thinking. This ultimately allows children to recognize a problem, start wondering what this might be, find out a way to discover this information, and figure out what they can conclude from the situation. They now think in a logical sense of the world around them without being directly in the situation. Today we will be taking a closer look at the preoperational stage. This stage presents an obvious increase in representation or symbolic activity in which children's mental capacity for the world blossoms. Piaget showed that in detaching thoughts from actions, there is the ability for more efficient thinking. Piaget saw that sensory motor activity leads to internal images of experiences which words can be used to describe. Piaget looked at the development of make-believe play, in which through pretending, young children are able to practice and strengthen newly required representational schemes. Firstly, this play allows children to detect from the real-life conditions associated with it. And until the age of 2, children are able to imitate adult actions by associating a symbol with the object. For example, if a toy telephone was used to talk, or being able to drink from a cup. After the age of 2, however, there is more flexibility with these objects and their meanings towards the children. Secondly, this play becomes less self-centered. At first, play is very directed to the child's self. This then transitions as children realize that agents and recipients of pretend actions can be independent of themselves. For example, being able to feed a toy doll and allowing the doll to feed themselves. Thirdly, play includes a more complex combination of schemes. For example, for the child to be able to drink from the cup, they realize they would have to pour it first. As well, children are able to make-believe play with others. Overall, make-believe play, in Piaget's view, allows children to practice their representational schemes, contributing to their cognitive and social skills. Piaget also brings up simple real-world relations. This shows when a child understands that picture, model, or map corresponds to something specific in their everyday life. They use this tool to find out new things they have not experienced. In exposing young children to diverse symbols like picture books, photographs, drawings, make-believe, and maps, it aids them to appreciate that one object can stand for another. This comes with age, in which the child is able to understand a wide range of symbols that have little physical similarity to what they represent. Now we will look at some of the limitations of the preoperational thought. The first limitation we will look at is the egocentric and animistic thinking. Piaget claims that fundamentally preoperational thinking is deficient due to egocentrism. This is the failure to distinguish the symbolic viewpoint of others from one's own. Children focus on their own viewpoint and assume that others think the same for them. This presents Piaget's 3-mountain problem, where the child cannot view the picture of the discrete mountains from the doll, but will choose the photo from their own point of view. Animistic thinking Piaget refers to is the belief of inanimate objects to have lifelike qualities like thoughts, wishes, feelings, and intentions. This brings us back to the idea that children are egocentric in assigning human purpose to physical objects. The next limitation is the inability to conserve. Conservation refers to the idea that certain physical characteristics of objects remains the same, even when their outward appearance changes. Let's look at the conservation of liquid. The child is shown 2 identical tall glasses of water and asked if they contain the same amount of liquid. The child agrees that they are the same. One of the glasses is then poured into a bowl, changing its appearance, but it is the same amount of water. The child is asked again which one has more, and they think that because the water is lower in the bowl, there is less water. This inability to conserve highlights several related aspects of preoperational children's thinking. Firstly, we will look at their understanding by centration. This shows how children focus on one aspect of a situation, neglecting other important features. Looking back at the glasses of water, they are not able to compensate for the fact that there is a change in width and center in on the height of the water instead. Secondly, children are distracted by the perceptual appearance of the objects. Thirdly, children tend to ignore a dynamic transition between events. For example, this would be seen the initial and final states of the water being transferred by pouring and not seeing the 2 states as completely different events. As well, we present the idea of irreversibility in preoperational thought. This is the inability for children to mentally go through a series of steps in a problem and then reverse the direction to where they started. This idea of reversibility is part of every logical operation. Another limitation is a lack of hierarchical classification. This organization of objects into classes and subclasses on the basis of similarities and differences is something that preoperational children have. The famous class inclusion problem shows that when children are asked if there are more red flowers or flowers, they say more red flowers. This states the limitation of preoperational children as they center on the overriding feature of red flowers and do not think about the reversibility of moving from the whole class to part of the class and back. This concludes our discussion on Piaget's cognitive developmental theory, specifically the preoperational phase. In summary, we noted that the most obvious change in the child's development was their extraordinary increase in representational and symbolic activity. This is well demonstrated in make-believe play and simple real-world relations. Finally, we covered the 3 major limitations of preoperational thought: egocentrism, conservationism, and lack of hierarchical classification. Thank you for joining me today and hope you enjoyed the video.